Picture this. You're standing in your kitchen right now, and somewhere in that cabinet full of dusty spice jars and forgotten seasonings, there is something that neuroscientists have been quietly studying for years, not a pharmaceutical, not a supplement that costs $40 a bottle. Something you probably already own, something you might have sprinkled into a recipe last week without giving it a second thought. And tonight, while you sleep, your brain is going to go through one of the most important processes in your entire biology, a cleanup cycle, a repair cycle. And the question is whether you're giving your brain what it needs to do that job properly. Because here's what most people don't realize. The quality of your cognitive function tomorrow, your memory sharpness next year, even your long-term risk for neurodegenerative disease decades from now, all of it is being influenced by what happens in your brain during those hours you're unconscious. And a specific compound found in a common kitchen spice appears to support that process in ways that genuinely surprised researchers when the data started coming in. Stay with me because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what that spice is, why the science behind it is more compelling than most health headlines you've seen, and how to actually use it in a way that could meaningfully change how your brain recovers each night. Let's start with the sleep problem nobody talks about enough. We all know sleep is important. We've been told that 10,000 times. But the specific reason your brain needs sleep, the actual biological mechanism, is something most people have never heard explained clearly. And once you understand it, everything changes. Your brain is metabolically expensive. It burns through enormous amounts of energy every single day just running your thoughts, your emotions, your perception of the world. And like any high-energy system, it produces waste. Metabolic byproducts, cellular debris. One of those byproducts is a protein called amyloid beta, which when it accumulates in excessive amounts is associated with serious cognitive problems over time. Now, here's the fascinating part. Your brain actually has a dedicated waste removal system. Scientists call it the glymphatic system. It's essentially a network that flushes cerebrospinal fluid through the brain tissue, sweeping out those metabolic waste products. And this system is dramatically more active during sleep than when you're awake. We're talking about a tenfold increase in activity. Your brain literally shrinks slightly during deep sleep to allow this fluid to flow more efficiently through the spaces between cells. So when you sleep poorly, or when you miss deep sleep stages, that cleanup doesn't happen effectively. Waste builds up, neural inflammation can increase, and over time, that accumulation becomes a real problem. This is why chronic poor sleep is one of the most consistently identified risk factors in cognitive decline research. Now you can see why anything that genuinely supports brain repair during sleep is worth paying attention to. And this is exactly where our kitchen spice enters the picture. The spice is turmeric, specifically the active compound within turmeric called curcumin. And before you roll your eyes because you've heard about turmeric for inflammation and joint pain, I want you to set all of that aside for a moment. What we're talking about here is neurological. It's about the brain. And the research in this area is genuinely different from the general wellness claims you're used to hearing. Curcumin is a polyphenolic compound. That's a category of plant-based molecules that have been found repeatedly to interact with biological systems in meaningful ways. What makes curcumin particularly interesting from a brain health standpoint is its relationship with something called BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. If you want one concept from this video to remember, make it that one. BDNF is essentially fertilizer for your neurons. It's a protein that supports the growth, maintenance, and survival of brain cells. It promotes neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to form new connections and reorganize itself. High BDNF levels are associated with better memory, faster learning, stronger cognitive resilience, and even improved mood. Low BDNF levels are consistently found in people with depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, and neurodegenerative conditions. Multiple studies have found that curcumin consumption is associated with increased BDNF expression in the brain. This means the compound from your spice cabinet is interacting with your brain's ability to maintain and regenerate its own neural architecture. That's not a small thing. That's a foundational mechanism. But let's go deeper because the BDNF story connects directly to what happens while you sleep. Research has shown that BDNF levels fluctuate with your sleep cycle. They tend to be higher during REM sleep and certain stages of deep sleep. And BDNF plays a direct role in sleep regulation itself, creating a kind of feedback loop. Better BDNF function supports more restorative sleep. More restorative sleep supports healthier BDNF expression. When curcumin enters that equation, it appears to push that cycle in a positive direction. There's also the inflammation angle, and this one is crucial for the nighttime repair story. Neuroinflammation, which is chronic low-grade inflammation in brain tissue, is one of the primary obstacles to effective neural repair during sleep. When your brain is inflamed, the glymphatic system doesn't work as efficiently. Cellular repair processes are compromised. The quality of your deep sleep stages can be degraded. Curcumin is one of the most extensively studied natural anti-inflammatory compounds we have. Its primary mechanism involves inhibiting something called NF-κB, which is a molecular switch that controls the expression of inflammatory genes. When NF-κB is overactive, you get chronic inflammation. When curcumin helps regulate that pathway, inflammation decreases. And in the context of the brain, that means a better environment for the repair work that your sleep is supposed to accomplish. Now, here's where I want to address something that probably crossed your mind a few minutes ago. If curcumin is so great, why hasn't every doctor been recommending it for decades? The answer is actually pretty interesting, and it involves a word called bioavailability. This is the reason why eating turmeric in your curry once a week probably isn't doing much for your brain. Curcumin on its own is notoriously difficult for the body to absorb. It passes through the digestive system relatively quickly, and very little of it actually makes it into the bloodstream in a usable form. The bioavailability of standard curcumin is genuinely poor. But researchers figured out a workaround, and it's been understood for quite a while now: black pepper. Specifically, a compound in black pepper called Piperine dramatically enhances curcumin absorption. We're talking about studies showing bioavailability increases of around 2,000% when Piperine is combined with curcumin. 2,000% is not a typo. The mechanism is actually elegant. Piperine inhibits certain liver enzymes and intestinal processes that would normally break down curcumin before it has a chance to enter circulation. By blocking that breakdown, far more curcumin reaches the bloodstream and, critically, the brain. So the protocol isn't just turmeric, it's turmeric with black pepper. And the good news is that you probably have both in your kitchen right now. But let's slow down for a second, because this is the part of health content where things often go off the rails. People hear exciting research, they apply it too aggressively, they don't see immediate results, or they use it incorrectly and then they dismiss the whole thing. I don't want that to happen here because the evidence genuinely warrants attention. So let me walk you through what the research actually shows versus what it doesn't show, so you have a realistic picture. What the research does show is compelling. Human clinical trials have found that curcumin supplementation in bioavailable forms can improve working memory performance, attention, and mood in healthy older adults. One notable study found that participants who took a bioavailable form of curcumin daily for 18 months showed significant improvements in memory tests compared to a placebo group. The same study used brain imaging and found reduced amyloid and tau protein accumulation in regions of the brain associated with memory and emotion. These are the same protein accumulations that are hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease pathology. Other research has found that regular curcumin intake is associated with reduced markers of oxidative stress in brain tissue, which is another factor in cellular aging and neurodegeneration. And animal studies have consistently shown that curcumin can cross the blood-brain barrier, which is a critical requirement for any compound to have direct neurological effects. What the research doesn't yet conclusively show is whether curcumin can prevent or reverse diagnosed neurodegenerative disease in humans. The evidence in that specific area is promising but not yet definitive. The honest answer is that we need more large-scale, long-term human trials. What we do have is a strong mechanistic picture, meaning we understand why it should work, combined with a growing body of evidence suggesting it does produce measurable cognitive benefits. This is actually a pretty strong position for a natural compound to be in, especially one with no serious safety concerns at normal dietary amounts. Now let's talk about the nighttime piece specifically, because there's a timing strategy here that makes a real difference. The reason this particular spice earns the label of a brain repair aid specifically at night comes down to the intersection of its mechanisms with sleep biology. Think about what your brain is doing during sleep. It's running the glymphatic flush, it's consolidating memories from the day, it's engaging in synaptic maintenance, which is essentially the pruning and strengthening of neural connections. It's cycling through BDNF dependent restoration processes. When you introduce curcumin into your system in the hours before sleep, you're essentially setting up a more favorable biochemical environment for all of those processes. The anti-inflammatory effect reduces the neuroinflammatory burden that would otherwise impair glymphatic function. The BDNF promoting effect supports the neural maintenance and plasticity work happening during REM and deep sleep. The antioxidant activity helps protect neurons from oxidative stress during the energetically intense work of cellular repair. It's not magic, it's not instantaneous. But as a consistent nightly practice, you're systematically improving the conditions under which your brain does its most important recovery work. And here's something that most people overlook. Curcumin also appears to interact with the body's natural melatonin pathways. Some research suggests it may support healthy melatonin signaling, which is the hormone your body produces to initiate and maintain sleep. This isn't fully characterized in the literature yet, but it adds another potential dimension to the nighttime timing rationale. Let me also mention something related to stress because this is a piece that connects everything together. One of the biggest disruptors of restorative sleep is elevated cortisol at night. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone, and when it remains high into the evening hours, it suppresses the deep sleep stages your brain needs most for repair. This is one reason why people who are chronically stressed often feel unrested even after a full night in bed. Curcumin has been studied in the context of the HPA axis, which is the hormonal system that governs cortisol production. Some research suggests it can help modulate the stress response at a neurological level, partly through its effects on certain serotonin and dopamine pathways. Lower neurological stress reactivity in the evening translates potentially to better cortisol rhythm and more accessible deep sleep. You can start to see how these mechanisms stack. Now, let me give you the practical framework, because understanding why something works is only useful if you know how to actually apply it. The first thing to know is that you want a bioavailable curcumin source. If you're working with whole turmeric powder, always pair it with black pepper, always. Without piperine, you're getting a fraction of the potential benefit. The ratio that tends to come up in research is roughly 20 parts turmeric to 1 part black pepper. In practical terms, if you're using a teaspoon of turmeric, you'd add about a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. Fat is also important. Curcumin is fat-soluble, meaning it dissolves in and is transported by fat. Taking it with a meal that contains healthy fats, or adding it to a warm drink made with whole milk or coconut milk or another fat source, significantly improves how much you absorb. One of the most time-tested delivery methods is a preparation called golden milk, which has roots in Ayurvedic tradition going back centuries. The basic version involves warming a cup of milk, whether dairy or plant-based, adding a teaspoon of turmeric, a pinch of black pepper, and optionally a small amount of cinnamon, ginger, and a touch of honey. Consumed roughly an hour before bed, this gives your digestive system time to begin processing and absorbing the curcumin before your sleep cycle begins. The warmth of the drink also has its own sleep-supporting qualities. Warming your core temperature slightly in the evening and then allowing it to drop naturally as the liquid is metabolized can help facilitate the drop in body temperature that is associated with sleep onset. It's a simple ritual with layered benefits. For people who prefer a supplement form, the key thing to look for is a product that specifies either Piperine enhancement or a patented bioavailability technology. There are several formulations on the market specifically designed to solve the absorption problem. These can be convenient if you're not interested in the preparation routine, though I'd always encourage the food-based approach first for its simplicity and cost-effectiveness. Let's also address dosing because this comes up every time. Studies using curcumin for cognitive outcomes have typically used doses ranging from around 500 milligrams to 2,000 milligrams of curcumin per day, usually in the bioavailable form. A teaspoon of turmeric powder contains roughly 200 milligrams of curcumin, so you can see that culinary use alone may not reach the levels used in clinical trials. For meaningful therapeutic effect, some people do choose to use concentrated supplements alongside their dietary intake. That said, it's also worth noting that the studies showing cognitive benefits sometimes used lower doses over longer periods. Consistency over time appears to matter more than hitting a specific daily number. This is not a compound where more is dramatically better. It's one where regular, sustained intake produces cumulative effects through its influence on ongoing biological processes. Let's check in with the bigger picture for a moment because I want to make sure this doesn't feel like just another supplement pitch dressed up in science. The core argument here is actually quite straightforward. Your brain repairs itself at night. The quality of that repair is influenced by your biochemical environment during sleep. Chronic neuroinflammation, low BDNF, oxidative stress, and elevated cortisol all degrade the repair environment. Curcumin, particularly in bioavailable form, addresses all four of those factors through documented mechanisms. Therefore, incorporating it consistently, especially in the evening, creates conditions more favorable to the repair your brain is already trying to do. It's not a cure for anything. It's not going to reverse existing damage overnight. It's an intervention in an ongoing process, one that your brain is running every night whether you support it or not. The question is whether you want to give that process better raw materials. And here's something I find genuinely interesting from a long-term perspective. The decisions you make about brain health in your 30s and 40s are incredibly consequential for your 70s and 80s. Neurodegeneration is not something that happens suddenly. It accumulates over decades. The amyloid plaques and tau tangles associated with Alzheimer's, for example, begin forming 15 to 20 years before symptoms appear. The window for intervention is long, and the interventions that work best appear to be consistent lifestyle practices rather than last-minute pharmaceutical rescues. This is why a humble kitchen spice, taken consistently over years, is potentially far more meaningful than it might seem at first glance. Not because it's magic, but because the mechanisms are real, the time horizon is long, and the compounding effect of daily support adds up. There's also something worth saying about the holistic picture. Curcumin is not going to compensate for chronically poor sleep habits. If you're going to bed at 2 in the morning, sleeping 4 hours, and staring at bright screens until the moment you close your eyes, a golden milk drink isn't going to save your brain. The spice is an amplifier, not a substitute. It works best in the context of generally good sleep hygiene. Consistent sleep schedule, a dark, cool room, limited screen exposure in the hour before bed, not eating heavy meals right before sleep, managing evening stress. These fundamentals create the foundation upon which something like curcumin can actually deliver its benefits. If those basics aren't in place, the biochemical support is only partial. Think of it as layered support. Each good habit you add to your evening routine adds another layer to the quality of the repair your brain can accomplish overnight. Curcumin is one powerful layer. Sleep timing, light exposure, and temperature are others. Together, they create a meaningfully different outcome than any single factor alone. I also want to mention something that doesn't get enough airtime in brain health discussions, which is the emotional dimension of this. There's a real psychological burden associated with worrying about cognitive decline. For anyone who has watched a parent or a grandparent lose their memory, the fear of that happening to oneself can be a constant low-grade anxiety. And anxiety, ironically, is itself a risk factor for poor sleep and the kind of neuroinflammation we've been talking about. Part of the value of having a concrete nightly ritual that supports brain health is that it can reduce that anxiety, not through denial, but through agency. You're doing something real, grounded in mechanisms you now understand. That sense of active participation in your own brain health has its own neurological benefits through stress reduction and the kind of purposeful behavior that supports positive neurochemistry. The golden milk before bed becomes more than just a vehicle for curcumin. It becomes a signal to your nervous system that the day is ending, that repair time is beginning, that you've taken care of yourself. That's not nothing. That kind of intentional winding down ritual has documented effects on cortisol rhythm and sleep quality, independent of anything specific you're consuming. Let's come back around to what we started with, that spice cabinet in your kitchen. The humble jar of turmeric that has probably been sitting there for months, used occasionally for color in a curry, maybe dusted onto roasted vegetables. What we've established today is that it contains one of the most well-studied neuroprotective compounds found in any food, one that supports BDNF production, reduces neuroinflammation, combats oxidative stress, and appears to create a more favorable environment for the repair work your brain is already trying to accomplish every single night. You don't need to change your entire lifestyle. You don't need to spend money on expensive protocols. You need a teaspoon of turmeric, a pinch of black pepper, a fat source, something warm to put it in, and about 20 minutes before bed to drink it quietly while you let your nervous system wind down. That's it. That's the intervention. Simple, inexpensive, grounded in genuine science, and potentially meaningful in ways that compound over years and decades. One final thought. The fact that the most powerful tools for brain health are often the most accessible ones is something I find consistently remarkable in this field. Exercise, sleep, community connection, and yes, plant compounds found in common spices routinely outperform expensive pharmaceutical interventions in the research on long-term cognitive resilience. The question is never really whether the tool is sophisticated enough, it's whether we're willing to use it consistently. So tonight, instead of going to bed the same way you always do, maybe open that spice cabinet, grab the turmeric, grab the black pepper, warm up some milk, and give your brain the best possible conditions to do what it's been trying to do for you every single night of your life. If you found this useful, there's a lot more on this channel about how everyday foods and simple habits intersect with your brain biology in ways that most people never get to hear about. The next video is going to take you somewhere equally unexpected. You won't want to miss it.